All right. Hello, and welcome to GCTV's Super Bowl 55 post-game review. My name is Jack Kelley, and here we are. End of the 101st NFL season? Yeah, because last year was 100. Here at the end of it, a lot of people probably didn't think they'd make it through it. A lot of disappointments, a lot of ups, lots of downs, and can't really say whether or not the Super Bowl was an up or a down. Probably an up for most Patriots fans, even because we've kind of been at the understanding we weren't going to go very far for a while now. But Brady will always be a part of the team and this culture and the city and state, whatever you want to call it. The whole section of the country, New England. There's like 13 of us that are all rooting for him, but they got their own teams in most of those places. Anyway, you hear it a lot, all over time. A word that probably no human used more than once a year. We've heard a million times this year. Precedented. An unprecedented year. They had a child from NFL Play 60 say it during the broadcast, and I was blown away. The language had, migrated to children even. But I've heard that word more in the past year than I need to in the rest of my life. But the reason it's said so many times is because it makes sense. Unprecedented times. COVID happening and all of the players getting tested every day, wearing contact bracelets, at least most of them. And the ones that aren't are about to get fined and shamed by the whole league, rightfully so. But we got to the end of it. Got all the way to the Super Bowl. And we expected a big-time show. Chiefs offense versus the Bucks defense was going to be great. We knew that they were going to learn because the Bucks improved all throughout the season. They went on an 8-game winning streak all the way to the Super Bowl. And the Chiefs got Patrick Mahomes, so you can't really count them out. And their defense in last year's playoffs and Super Bowl kind of started to turn it on towards the end of the year. This year, their defense started really hot and then kind of fell off. I actually should get the exact ratings. I know that the Chiefs' offense was ranked like number 1 in the entire league, and I know their defense was middle of the pack. And that raises the question: why is that what I looked up instead of looking up the Bucks, which is what I was actually interested in? But Tampa Bay's offense was always kind of good. Their total offense, they were ranked 7th in the league in total offensive yards, and 6th in the league in total defensive yards allowed. So, and they were number 1 in rushing defense across the board. So, pretty impressive stuff from that defense. The defensive backs, they were below average, but when you drop your safeties back every single play, it doesn't really matter how good your cornerbacks are because you just multiply it by 2 and you get a better result. Anyway, that's all the pregame stuff I wanted to go over, minus some things. I had 4 pages of notes written while watching the game. I whittled it down, I think, to still at 3 pages, but I got rid of a lot of stuff just to get to the important bits so this podcasty thing isn't an hour long, which gets us right into the first quarter. Chiefs defense started with that 3 and out, and I noted that the defense needed to keep this up. They needed to play over their heads. They needed to be better than they actually were. Like I said, they were the 16th ranked defense in the league, and they needed to play like they were at least a top 10 defense to break I'm saying Patriots now. The Buccaneers offense, which superstars at every single level. And then Tampa Bay's defense right off the bat kind of showed everyone that it's not screwing around. You hear the reports about, both the Kansas City Chiefs tackles are out, and you think, well, that's probably going to be somewhat of a factor. And then, I think they didn't get a sack that first quarter. They might have gotten 1, but you could tell even without them getting, sacks and big stats and stuff like that, you could tell just from watching that that defense was going to be a problem. I mean, they made the offensive line look silly. And it also didn't help that the Kansas City Chiefs receivers were literally and figuratively dropping the ball a lot. They were not catching balls thrown right at them. Mahomes was getting pressured, so he was throwing balls into the ground, out of bounds and stuff. So they couldn't really click, which at the time I would have said was a good thing. Because if you kind of get ahead of yourselves and then get stomped by a defense like that, it really tends to dissuade you, ruin your confidence going into, the rest of the, 3 quarters of the game. But they stalled out really quickly. Tampa Bay got the ball back and just started running the ball every down. They'd run it with Leonard Fournette. They'd get, 8 yards, and then on third down, Ronald Jones the second would come in and he would finish it off. He would get the first down. And Ronald Jones runs like a duck. He like waddles, and no one can tackle the guy. It's incredible. But I was worried after seeing this that they were going to eventually run into a wall, aka Chris Jones, and they were going to just forget about the passing game. But this is around the time when I realized that the Chiefs' defense was not going to play better than they were. They were not going to play above their ability. They were going to play exactly as good as they were, which was average at best. That was the first quarter. Very slow. I think there was a Gronk touchdown and a Chiefs field goal. I think that was it. I think it was just 7-3 going into the second, which is not that's not insane. Yeah, it was 7-3 going into the second quarter. And that first quarter was pretty slow, and I think it showed everyone like, all right, well, the Buccaneers, got a touchdown. Tom Brady's never got a touchdown in the first quarter of a Super Bowl, but now he has. So let's see what he can do with this now. And then going into that second quarter, second quarter is probably the most interesting quarter of the game. Not the best, but the most interesting. Right away, Buccaneers drive all the way down the field, and I mean, right away that Bruce Arians is going to go all out. So they get down to like the 1 yard line, and the Chiefs linebackers decide that even though they are by far the worst unit on that defense, I mean, there is no one worth mentioning. Like Anthony Hitchens is their captain of the linebackers. And their coach, for God's sake, is in jail. They put 2 children in a hospital. So they have not had the time to practice to get up to speed for this game. But they decide that they aren't going to let any of those things be excuses. And Damian Wilson, the 4-3 outside linebacker, mostly coverage linebacker, essentially, for those of you who don't know a ton about football but want to learn more, he is essentially just a middle linebacker, but they don't use outside linebackers for rushing, so they switch him to outside. He decides he wants to have a moment, and he completely stops Leonard Fournette. I mean, he puts his shoulder right on the ball so that he can't push it past the goal line and saves them. Then Tyreek Hill had like some crazy circus runaround and got them out of the end zone, but still, Chiefs stalled out again, and this is when things got interesting. Like I said, not good, but interesting. The holding calls started getting pretty regular. And at first, it was like, yeah, they're holding and they're pushing and they're shoving and they're doing a lot. These Kansas City cornerbacks are not hanging well with the receivers, which makes complete sense, seeing as the receivers are 100 times better than the cornerbacks. But then it got out of hand. And I remember starting to get a little frustrated, but not really like, oh my God, this is ruining the game. It was just like, all right, let's cool it with the flags. And a lot of ticky-tack stuff was, and Well, it was unfortunately falling the Chiefs' way, and this is the kind of thing where those 50-50 penalties, like where two guys are pushing each other and the ref catches it when, one guy's pushing the guy who pushed him first, but he doesn't see the first one, so he throws the flag. It can go either way, and really it ends up equaling almost every game. It ends up balancing itself. You never see a game get decided because the ref missed the guy who pushed first. So that stuff I really don't care about. I let that slide. I don't take much, you know, value in that. But it didn't matter. They scored another touchdown, the Buccaneers did. And then, finally, I felt like the Chiefs figured it out. They started, they would put Kelley on the same side of the field as Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill would run streaks and deep posts, and he would absorb the double team, leaving Travis Kelley wide open in the middle of the field in one-on-one coverage. He got his drop out of the way early in the first quarter. Travis Kelley has one drop in every game that makes him look like the worst player on the planet, and then he doesn't drop for the rest of the game. And they finally got it together. And then again, they stalled out. They kicked a field goal. And I said, okay, 6-14 is a one-possession game. Kansas City is very much still in this game. I said aloud, knowing in the back of my head that it was looking very bad. Because the offensive line was just getting manhandled. And I'll talk about it later, but the defense didn't record many stats that the average viewer sees. They didn't record many sacks, but they had a Super Bowl record 29 pressures, quarterback pressures, most in Super Bowl history. And even the most casual viewer could see that. People watching for the halftime show were like, wow, that defensive line is creating a lot of pressure. My grandmother said that. Then Tampa Bay gets the ball back. There's like a minute left. I don't hate that Kansas City was taking those timeouts. I get it. I understand it. You want to get the ball back. You understand that you're giving Tom Brady a chance to go score and you're kind of helping him. But at the same time, you've got Patrick Mahomes. You can go down and score just as easily, in theory. They got the ball. They had a couple quick passes, that go, the receivers get out of bounds, and they're probably around the middle of the field, maybe their own 40, 45. They go play action, which doesn't matter. Play action on your own 40 with like 40 seconds left when you have one timeout is meaningless because they're not going to run the ball. There's no chance. There's a 0% chance they run the ball there. Everyone knows that. And anyone who has access to the Green Bay game film where Scotty Miller burnt Kevin King for a touchdown before the end of the half also knows that. Steve Spagnuolo, who is a Grafton, Massachusetts high school alum, he did not represent our town very well last night because apparently he didn't know that. And Mike Evans runs down the field, and Rashad Breeland knows as soon as the ball leaves Brady's hands, probably before that, probably as soon as the ball gets snapped, and he looks Evans in the eyes and says, oh God, he's running a route. He knows he's beat. He knows that there's no meaningful chance for him to make a play on the ball or even to play regular defense. So what does he do? He goes for his ankles and tries to trip him before the ball gets there. He intentionally attempts to get a pass interference called. Now, as soon as I saw Tom Brady throw the ball, as soon as the ball left like the camera and it started to pan, I knew what was going to happen. I was like, someone's gotten beat. They have to commit pass interference. Otherwise, it's going to be a touchdown. You'd rather give up a field goal than a touchdown. And at that point, giving up pass interference at that spot isn't going to give him a touchdown. But it is going to guarantee the field goal at least. And knowing how the refs had played the game out so far, you know they're going to call it. They called back a interception earlier in the game for a holding call that was made up. I mean, the guy grabbed the air. He just closed his fist, and they called a holding penalty. If you don't get any of the jersey, you can't be called for holding. But knowing how the refs had called the game up to that point, you know that they're not going to miss the PI call, which is good because he's trying to get pass interference called. And that shows you just how, or what happened next shows you just how bad the Kansas City Chiefs defense was. He barely scraped Mike Evans' heel, barely touched the guy. And Mike Evans, who's always been kind of an emotional player, he's had a lot of problems on the field, losing his temper, attacking people. He does a great job flopping. He feels that Breland has touched his leg, knows in his mind that it hasn't made any impact on him running, sees that he's not going to be able to catch the ball because it was overthrown, and falls to his knees. He makes a motion falling to the ground no human being does because another human being physically influenced them. I remember, like, physics, that the whatever physics law says, like, anything that, if something's in motion, it tends to stay in motion unless another, force acts on it. No force can make a human move the way Mike Evans moved when he fell to the ground. But the refs call it, which a lot of people freaked out about. But I said, even though Breland didn't commit pass interference, he tried to. So if you're gonna, he obviously was trying to commit pass interference. So you might as well call the penalty. It's like in basketball when you intentionally foul someone to send them into the free throw line. If you try and foul someone and you, miss and go headfirst into the stands, but you kind of get the guy a little bit, you can't turn around and say, "Oh my God, why would you call an intentional foul? I didn't intentionally foul him." It's like, yeah, well, you tried to. That was your plan. You premeditated trying to foul. So I didn't get mad at that. I don't know why anyone would get mad at that. The thing people should be mad at is the next call, where Tom Brady throws the ball out of the back of the end zone, hits the bottom of the stands, like the barrier between the stadium's chairs and the field. No human being can catch that football. And they throw pass interference in the end zone. And first of all, it was a pretty weak pass interference. It was pass interference if the ball was catchable. But even for PI standards, it was pretty weak. But that ball couldn't have been further away without actually being in the stands. It couldn't have been further away from them without breaking some COVID protocol. It was a horribly thrown ball, thrown horribly on purpose by Brady because he knew the officials were were officiating poorly. Up to that point, it was the worst officiated Super Bowl I'd ever seen. And I was really getting worried that would be this Super Bowl's legacy, would be the refs handed Brady his 7th. And I didn't want that to be known as, I didn't want that to be the legacy that was left. My first Super Bowl, I think, was probably the 2011 Super Bowl where we lost to the Giants the second time. I was too young to really care, but I know that I remember watching it. What I'm trying to say is I didn't watch Super Bowl XL. I don't even know. I think that's 40. That was the Steelers and the Seahawks. But I know people say that one was the worst officiated Super Bowl, that, the Steelers pretty much got handed the game by the refs. The Seahawks should have won or whatever. I didn't watch it, so I don't know whether or not that's true. But I do think even with just the first half, how poorly it was officiated, and assuming that Super Bowl XL was officiated poorly the whole game based on how much people talk about it, I still think that this Super Bowl will go down as the worst officiated. Not necessarily the reason that the outcome was the way it was, but without a doubt, it had a major impact. That was the entire halftime show, was the referees getting blasted by everyone. People who thought the Bucks were going to win, people who thought the Chiefs were going to win, people who just wanted to see a good game. Everyone was like, these refs needs to stop. I don't care how undisciplined your team is. When you go into the half and the penalties are 9-1, 100 yards to 10, something has to be wrong. You can't, almost every penalty in football can be argued either way, or just argued away in general. So when you have 9 called penalties, you have to sit there and say, how many of these were unnecessary? Like, defensive holdings make more sense, but like holdings that are away from the ball that actually weren't even real, that had very little effect, that stuff you don't call in the Super Bowl. You just don't call those in the Super Bowl. They go into the half. Tampa Bay is now up 21-6. And Antonio Brown gets a touchdown, and you know, Tyrann Mathieu and Brady chases Tyrann Mathieu across the field to get in his face, which was pretty awesome to watch. And again, and Mathieu gets called for a penalty after that also. But it I remember being very upset at that point, being like, all right, these refs have to stop. But then halftime comes. I don't really watch the analysis. I try and do my own. I was sitting with my laptop with my grandparents trying to just, you know, analyze the first half. And I remember sitting there going, all right, now that I've had time to like remove myself from this, coach debacle or the referee debacle, I can actually look at the Chiefs offense, and it's bad. 6 points and a half is terrible when you're as good at offense as they are. But towards the end, they started figuring it out. They started getting guys down the field, started getting people open. Travis started getting some of those middle of the field catches. Tyreek was absorbing his double teams, but guys like Byron Pringle, Sammy Watkins finally got a catch. Byron Pringle was incredible this game on special teams and in his capacity as a receiver. He deserves some credit. But as soon as those receivers and Kelley started making catches is when the offensive line became noticeably worse, which is saying something because they were already really bad. As soon as you take those guys away, you're going to automatically see a shift in the offensive line. And that, I don't think, is something that they were willing to forfeit. I don't think they could. I think if their offensive line, I think they recognized if it got any worse, there was a 0% chance they won the game. And going into halftime, their chances were already really slim. So, a lot of people were saying during the halftime analysis, this is the Kansas City Chiefs. They're only down by 15 points. That's only 2 possessions. They can do it. And I was saying, yeah, that's, Chiefs come back all the time. No reason to panic. But just because they do it a lot doesn't make it less difficult. It just means that they're really good. I thought they should go into the locker room and just meditate for half an hour. Stay the course. They had just started to figure it out. They realized the safeties were dropping back every play. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had started going. They were running the ball very effectively. They had it figured out. They had to just keep doing exactly what they were doing. Tampa, I wrote down, I said, Tampa Bay has played a perfect game so far. There's only one mistake they can make. They can go into the locker room and say, hey guys, I know a lot of you haven't been here before. Brady and Gronk have been here before, and Ndamukong Suh was here in the Super Bowl with the Rams, but he got killed. Jason Pierre-Paul has been here before, but everyone else hasn't been here. Most of the guys on the team hadn't even been to the playoffs. The only mistake they could have made is to go in there and say, oh my God, you guys are playing so well. Just keep doing exactly what you're doing. Everything will be okay if we just keep the course. I'm so proud of you guys. If they do that and the Chiefs shift what they're doing, Chiefs are going to come right back and the Bucs are going to get killed. But they didn't. And we'll talk about that once we get into the third and fourth quarters. But I did want to mention before I moved on to the rest of this game that after the halftime show was performed, which breathed a lot of good memes, but not very good entertainment, that scene of the camera being all wonky and the lead singer pushing the camera all around, that video with the caption Patrick Mahomes running around the field looking for an open receiver has been tweeted at me probably a dozen times, and it's never not funny. It's been funny every single time. But if this is your first time watching any GCTV original content that I'm involved in, at least, this is I have a rating system I've created. It's a 1 out of 4 ranking system. Every number has a word association that makes it very easy, very simple to rank most things. 1 through 4. 1 is bad, 2 is okay, right down the middle. 3 is good, and 4 is great. There's no excellence or, perfects or anything like that. Everything can be categorized. Both my grandparents, who was watching the game with, this was the second year in a row, we were social distanced, everything was, up to code, and we watched the game, and they determined that this halftime show was a 1. Neither of them liked it. I thought my grandmother was going to love it because The Weeknd's music is pretty good, but she did not like it. And I would like to know where Mr. The Weeknd's $7 million that he spent of his own money went into this, because it was pretty dumb. Anyway, back to what really matters, the football. Right off the bat, the Chiefs come out and they pick up where they left off. Allaire is running the ball really well, and they're starting to get things moving. And I think this is when I really figured out why even the most knowledgeable football fans can't coach from the sidelines, or can't coach from their couches. I'm watching this whole game, and I've mentioned it many times. The safeties are dropping back. The linebackers are rushing. If you run to the outside with Allaire, if he makes one person miss, he's got at least 10 yards before there's even a receiver that has the potential of tackling him. But I didn't ever think of that. I didn't have all the facts. I only had what I was seeing on the television. So even with how much I've obsessed over the details of this game, I didn't once think, wow, they should just start running the ball like crazy. They should just switch their entire philosophy and just run the ball, which is something they don't do. But that just proves why a staff of coaches that have tons of film and can question all the players and look at the defense, what their packages are, look at the all-22 footage. That's why they're the coaches and I'm watching on television. One of the most hopeful signs in the second quarter didn't have anything to do with either of the teams. Carl Sheffer, who is the lead referee for this game, one of the Chiefs' defensive linemen got pushed backwards, and when he got pushed, his arm ended up hitting Carl Sheffer right in his face, and his hat came flying off, and I was positive he was going to throw a flag, and we were going to pick up right where we left off. But he didn't. He swallowed his whistle, as they say. He didn't throw a flag. He recognized that someone got pushed into him, and that, since a fight hadn't broken out, it probably wasn't a big deal. And instead of, being the normal sensitive ref that most are, where as soon as they feel a breeze near them, they have to find someone to give a penalty flag to, he just said, all right, I know what happened. I'm not going to call a penalty. And this is, I'm looking at my notes, and I'm pretty sure this is around the time that the Patriots, Jesus, I'm doing it again. The Patriots, I said it again. What I meant was the Buccaneers. I'm pretty sure this is the point where the Buccaneers, Leonard Fournette had a big running touchdown. Leonard Fournette played really well. I thought that he was a dark horse for Super Bowl MVP if the fans weren't the ones voting, because if the fans are voting, of course Brady's going to win it. But he goes in for a 30-ish yard touchdown. Buccaneers go up 28-9, and I realized the game is over. I immediately just start thinking of, off season, looking back on this season to think of how they did it, and I look at the coaching staff. I look at, first of all, the defense on the Buccaneers, the job they did, making, Mahomes, keeping him in line. But more importantly, the Buccaneers' offense, their ability to, I forget who the coach was, but the Arizona Cardinals head coach, when they played that early season game against the Browns, and he had that whole rant, they are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook. Most teams, offenses and defenses, it's pretty easy to look at the stats and figure out what they are. Kansas City Chiefs are a middle of the pack defense. And if they have a really good defensive game, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden they've gotten way better. It means they're playing better than they are, which is a testament to their coaching. But when you're able to make them look exactly as good as they are, it tends to be covered up in some level of where the media will say, oh, well, they just underperformed. When in reality, it's the other team is just knows exactly what they're doing. They're playing as well as they can. And Kansas City is going to figure that out now. They're going to realize they have no defensive back depth. They have Tyrann Mathieu and a bunch of guys who would be cornerback 2 or 3 on most good teams. They have no linebacking talent. Absolutely none. They drafted Willie Gay in the second round, and I think he's on injured reserve, but he's not a guy who's going to change your entire, 4-3 linebacker core. He's not going to do that. That's not the kind of player he is. He was never that in college. He was just a good coverage receiver or linebacker in college. Their defensive line is good, but they don't generate enough pressure even with the amount of blitzing they do. And Frank Clark is good, but he's not worth the money he's making, and he doesn't get the production that his talent should get him. He's fast, he has all the moves, and yet he doesn't get all that many sacks. He gets a good pressure, but he doesn't get sacks. I was really starting to look back even to last year's Super Bowl and say, how bad were the 49ers if this defense made them look bad? Like, this defense crushed the 49ers last year. And the Bucs are killing them now. So I really thought back and said, I wonder if there's more to this. Then I started to ponder on Mahomes. Watching him play the game he did, up to that point, I knew that all the blame was probably going to be placed on him. And today I saw on ESPN Pat McAfee said he was shocked by how bad Mahomes played and kind of proved me right, I knew right away Mahomes was going to get the blame, even though he played best on anyone on his team. He was running for his life and he was still making good throws. But next day, Mahomes doesn't play well in the Super Bowl. Well, maybe it's because he's playing with one foot and he's running backwards the entire game. But it didn't really matter at that point. I think everyone kind of felt, all right, now it's over. We can keep saying out loud, well, the Chiefs can come back from anything, but it's going to start to be less and less sincere. And Allaire ended the third quarter brilliantly. Clyde Edwards-Allaire really did shine in this game. He did everything he could. Every time he touched the ball, he'd made a play. And now it is time for the fourth quarter. Usually the most interesting quarter of football, but in this case it was more the slow death of the Kansas City Chiefs. It's like watching a boxing match. Match is the worst word to use in boxing, but my throat's starting to get a little dry and I'm trying to wrap this up. It's like watching a fight. Boxing, it's like 12 rounds. And when you go down, if you get back up, even if you go down 20 times, if you get back up convincingly enough, the ref's not going to call it. They're going to let the fight go. Especially if it's like an undercard fight. It's like watching a really small guy get the crap beat out of him by a really big guy, but he keeps getting up, and you're sitting at home going, for the love of God, just lay down. Like, you're not proving anything anymore. I already am going to say that, like, wow, he really did fight till the very end, but I don't actually want you to do it, because I'm afraid you might get hurt forever. Like, I'm afraid you might get hurt, and it's not something that, like, a doctor can fix within an hour. So I was just saying, please guys, just stop running the hurry up. Stop trying to break Mahomes' feet. Mahomes is getting spun around. He's throwing 360 passes into the end zone that are catchable. He's lateral with the ground, getting tackled, and throws a ball that hits a guy right in his face, and the receiver can't catch it. Or it was one of the running backs. It was Darrell Williams. But he's like a robot. Like, he's like throwing perfectly accurate passes in the most impossible scenarios. But he gets off the field again, 2 failed fourth down conversions, and now the Bucks are just trying to run the clock out. Byron Leftwich, the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, deserves most of the coaching credit for the offense. Obviously, Todd Bowles deserves a ton of credit for how well this defense played, but Byron Leftwich took Tom Brady, and for the beginning of the season when they weren't very good, when they were 7-5, he tried to turn the entire offense into the Patriots offense, and that time I did mean to say Patriots. But then he realized after they lost three in a row, they go into their bye week, and he says, all right, my running backs can't catch. My receivers aren't the dink and dunk kind of receivers. They like to go down the field and make big plays. And Brady is not used to throwing it down the field. He likes having safety valves in his running backs. I need to bring them to the middle. And this thought of mine that Byron Leftwich had perfectly done that came dead in the middle of the Jeep commercial where Bruce Springsteen was singing a song about bringing people to the middle. It was an epiphany. It was incredible. It made my night. I was very proud of myself. And then as my notes divulge, I can tell you that I got very tired and was very understanding the game was over, because the only note I didn't clip out when I realized that the game was over, and before filming this podcast, realized that, I should trim down some of these notes since not all of them are meaningful and won't all give me relevant information that'll help me in the podcast. The guy who streaked onto the field, I read an article about him earlier today, which had nothing that I'm going to repeat on this because none of it's relevant or interesting. But I had written down that the Kansas City Chiefs should probably pay that guy and have him play cornerback because they need all the help they can get at that point. Patrick Mahomes did not play well last night. Is it his fault 100%? No. Is it his fault a little bit? Sure. He had one foot. He's getting surgery on the other foot. He had no offensive line. He had no defense. He had underachieving wide receivers and tight ends. He got sacked in the fourth quarter when they were down 28-9. He gets sacked for the third time. He gets crushed by Ndamukong Suh and William Golston. Just gets squashed by these 300-pound giants. And instead of lying there for half a second or wincing in pain or complaining to his offensive line or the refs or his sideline or anything, he jumps on top of the ball, which he had fumbled because he got destroyed, and he gets up and tries to run down the field with it. They are down by 19 points? Yeah, they're down by 19 points with probably close to 4 minutes left. And he didn't for a second think, is it worth it to get up and run with this? I mean, it's not going to like we're going to win the game. He just did it because he knew that's what he was supposed to do. They could have been down 100 points. He could have actually had his leg amputated at halftime, and he probably would have still grabbed the ball and started trying to run. So, yes, he didn't win. Yes, he has bad stat lines for both Super Bowls, but I don't think it's time for us to turn this into a spin zone and start talking about how is Patrick Mahomes maybe a little overrated? I don't think we're there yet. I think we still have to recognize him as the best talent in the league. And that is the last I'll say for the Chiefs. Because now it is time for me to essentially, for the purposes of this video, become a Tampa Bay Buccaneers superfan / scout. Because, well, at least I hope some people who watch this are football fans, big football fans, maybe as big as me. Because I really love football. Football is a great sport. It's extremely strategic. A lot of people just see it as like a Goliath's game. Bunch of big meatheads pumped full of steroids run at each other as fast as they can. But once you look past that, because I'm not saying that's not what it is, it's very entertaining to watch. But most people, their knowledge only goes so deep. They don't have the free time that a 22-year-old who's done with college and has a job at a television studio, they don't have the kind of time I've got on my hands. So, I feel that if they want that knowledge and they don't have the time to study and obtain it, I might as well do my part in helping. So, let me tell you a little bit about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. First of all, they won the Super Bowl at this point. This is the end of my notes, is what I'm trying to say. I have no more notes on the game. That's my thoughts on the game. But now, we're going to look at the Bucs. It's their first Super Bowl win since their last Super Bowl win, which was in 2002, which was pretty similar to this game, except for some weird things like the head coach of the Bucs was the head coach of the team they were facing the year before, and the other team's center had a mental breakdown that landed him in a mental hospital a couple weeks later, the night before the game, so they didn't have him. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coach knew all the offensive plays before they called them. But that was in 2002. This is 2021. And the guy who no one's going to know about, it's easy for anyone who wants to know about football to turn on their television and hear people saying, Brady's so great, Gronk is so great, Bruce Arians is so great. The guy who's not going to get enough credit, and the guy who deserves, I'd say close to 60% of the credit. And again, this is coming from someone who dove deep, looked all the way back to 2014. The guy who deserves, in my opinion, the majority of the credit is Jason Leach. Jason Leach is the general manager of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and has been since 2014. Let's see how old he is. I think he's in his mid-40s. No, he's late 40s. He's 49 years old. The only thing he wasn't in control of was the coaching staff. So he came in. Ownership said, do whatever you want with the players. We're going to get the coaches. He said, okay, I'll do the best I can on my end and just hope you hold up your end of the bargain, which they didn't do at first. But he came in and he said, I am going to do everything I can in my power to make this team better. He never went out and signed, I'm going to give this guy $200 million to come play for our team. He signed guys under the radar that he knew were good, but no one was going to pay for. A guy who's not going to break the bank, but to a team that's really good and doesn't have a lot of money, it will. He's saying, I can pay this guy for less and get him. He'll still be very good. He got a lot of those guys. Guys like Shaquille Barrett, guys like Ndamukong Suh, Jason Pierre-Paul, Antonio Brown, Ryan Suckup the kicker, Gronk out of retirement. And then they let Jameis walk, famous Jameis Winston, first overall pick in the 2015 draft, I think. And they sign Tom Brady, 2-year, $50 million contract this year. So his approach to the free agent market is pretty perfect. But that wasn't what he wanted to do. That wasn't his idea. He said he was going to build the team through the draft. And when you can't control your coaching staff and you're sticking with a quarterback you drafted first overall, not because he's good, but because you drafted him first overall and you're afraid of looking bad, it's really hard to notice all of the things he did incredibly well in the draft because the team overall wasn't very good. Once they finally got rid of Jameis, they went 7-9 in 2019. The only major player that changed was Tom Brady. And they go from 7-9 out of the playoffs, third in their division, to Super Bowl champions with one player change and one coaching change. That shows you how good the team already was. And once the ownership finally got them a real coach in Bruce Arians, instead of Dirk Cutter and I don't remember the guy. I think it was Lovie Smith before him. Bruce Arians gets in there. Byron Leftwich, Todd Bowles get in there, and Brady gets signed. Boom, this is a real team now. All these players get to shine. I'm going to give you a short list. That's actually a very long list of players that Jason Leach drafted. Some of these guys are first round picks, which if you miss with your first round pick, that means you're really bad. Your first round pick should be guaranteed hits. Let me give you the first round picks now, so we can get them out of the way. So then when I name these other guys, and you see how, you don't have to know everything about the sport, remember the names. I'm not even going to tell you what positions they play. But when you hear me start rattling off all of these names, you're going to realize what I'm talking about. There's 7 rounds in an NFL draft, and this guy is consistently getting Pro Bowl and All-Pro talent in late picks, which is incredibly valuable when you're a small market team like the Bucs. Here are their first round picks: Mike Evans, Jameis Winston, Quan Alexander, Devin White, Tristan Wirf. And that's it. So what is that, like 4 guys? Oh, Vita Vea. I missed Vita Vea. Defensive tackle. Very good player. Those are all very good players that got drafted in the first round by Jason Leach. Only one he missed on was Jameis, and all the quarterbacks in that year's draft were really bad. So even that one isn't really his fault. Although Jameis is terrible, and so is Mariota. Anyway, I'm going to just start naming names of players he drafted in late rounds that played major roles in this Super Bowl, or were traded for major pieces, or they didn't re-sign, aka Quan Alexander, who's pretty good, but not worth the money that other people are going to pay. Donovan Smith, Ali Marpet, Chris Godwin, Ronald Jones II, Carlton Davis, Jordan Whitehead, Sean Murphy Bunting, Jamal Dean, Mike Edwards, Scotty Miller, Antoine Winfield. It's a lot of names. Since 2014, this guy has been killing it in the draft, and I don't see why that's going to change in the future. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are my favorites going into next season to win the Super Bowl. Unless the Packers have like a crazy good draft and the Chiefs get a ton of depth on their defense, Buccaneers probably going to win the Super Bowl next year. And, for Christ's sake, Brady's probably going to win it again the next year after that. I don't think this guy's ever going to retire. And I'm okay with that. I think that's all I want to say. Appreciate you watching. Anyone who did. This was GCTV's recap of Super Bowl 55. If this is something you like, please leave some feedback in all the normal places: Facebook, YouTube, all the general outlets, and say if this is something you'd like to see more of. I love talking sports, get into some basketball takes. MLB season starting up soon. College basketball is still going on. I'm wondering if we're going to have March Madness this year. College football starts a week early. So, a lot of different topics we can talk about. If this is something you'd like to see more of, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching. This is Jack Kelley. See you next time.